Hello and welcome back. Today we will be continuing our, for lack of a better phrase, map painting Mali run, where we are kind of going over a theoretical run, using it as a framework for talking about ideas in Europa Universalis 5, while also constructing a theoretical run based on the couple of runs that I was able to do with Mali with the access I had ahead of time on Europa Universalis 5. Last episode we kind of focused on our starting condition, including our geography, our topography, our climate, but especially our unique position in Mali with the resources we have available, where we have a ton of gold available and also very valuable saffron, and this kind of informed an overall strategy that would be based on really pushing trade, which Mali has an advantage in. In order to be a trade empire, we will have to become a colonial empire in order to gain the most we possibly can, and to that end, the northwestern portion of our territory is going to be critically important, having the flatlands on the coast, the farmlands on the coast, and this is overall our best coastal territory we have available, and it is all consolidated in one place. We also focused on a specific challenge of ours, which is that a large portion of our cultures are not accepted, and this challenge will continue throughout the run, but these are not going to be things we focus on as much because we want to cover and talk about new system. In terms of where we left off, we were facing down the decline of Mali disaster as well as the Black Plague, and so we will have a bumpy ride for the next few years here. It felt like a common play pattern with all of the runs was during the Black Plague or following the Black Plague, it really felt like you were in recovery mode. Growth felt slow, if not just negative, as you didn't have enough people to employ all the buildings you had made use of in expanding your economy before. So the amount of research we gain access to is going to be a flat modifier multiplied by any sort of percentage modifiers we have, where the flat modifier is going to be 1 plus an amount that is going to be based on a liturgical language, where the best liturgical language, in this case Latin at game start, is going to give 1, and then proportionate to how powerful your language is to Latin, or whatever the strongest is, you will get a flat modifier. Arabic's the second strongest. As far as language power goes, for whatever reason, I think that the number of clergy matter, but I wasn't able to track down where exactly it says that anywhere, so take that with a grain of salt. If clergy do matter, it is interesting that you can force something like scriptorium buildings, where you can disproportionately recomp the population in your nation towards having more clergy, but for our intents and purposes, we're going to assume that Arabic, being the second best, is going to give 0.75 flat, and then we are also going to assume we have maybe 20% in terms of percentage modifiers, so we will be getting a good amount of research. This incidentally does kind of put Mali in actually a really kind of solid spot, where it is this kind of like significant power that is like isolated at game start, that has some interesting geographical advantages. You are able to endure the malaria and this types of stuff, so you are uniquely kind of equipped to make a power base in Africa while simultaneously actually having access to relatively good tech. So liturgical language is also how the West gains their advantage over the rest of the world technologically, and I do think that this is going to be a bit different in terms of how it feels than Europa Universalis 4. I don't know if it's better or stronger, but you're effectively getting double the tech. However, in other areas of the world, you will be unlocking institutions about the same time, or this is what we experienced. Institutions weren't really the throttle, which means that as you enter a new age, you get access to all the same tech basically at the same time. And so while you might be getting half as many techs, you will have access to the relative premium techs at the same time the West does. Now, of course, you won't be able to hit the bottom of the tree as quickly, but this does create an interesting dynamic. You're getting half as many techs, but if you put all of your technological power into one sphere, you can be just as good as the West. The West is just going to be better at more things, and I do think that is a bit interesting, and it creates for play patterns that are probably pretty dissimilar from Europa Universalis 4. When talking about tech in EU5, I've repeatedly brought up this idea of opportunity cost, and I think it's a really important one to be using and thinking about when thinking about technology selection in Europa Universalis 5, and I think that it's important to note that there are kind of two opportunity costs you are paying when you select a technology. The first is the more obvious one, which is that you are deciding which techs to get. It is not the case that you're going to research every tech over the course of the game. It's not a linear progression like EU4, or an instance where you are expected to get every tech like Victoria 3. Instead, you can get 50 to 75% of the techs, depending on your research speed and the number of unique advances you get. And so you are going to have to decide which techs are better. But beyond that, you also have to consider in what order you want to get the techs. There might be a technology that's better, but not particularly timely, so you don't want to get it right away. Like, let's say, if you're not going to be fighting any wars, it might not be worth getting manpower buildings, even if they are, in the abstract, more important than the other technologies. And so you are going to want to be able to sort and think about which techs are the most important, but also which techs are the most timely. So this might get a little interactive in the sense that I am going to encourage you, as we go through the text, to decide what you think is more important on the axis of it's just a better tech for us, and secondarily, what's going to be more important in terms of we need this right now, or it would be very useful for us to get this right now. Now, for this, we should briefly kind of overview what's going on with our country. The first is, in the long term, we want to leverage advantages that we get in trade, which are going to be particularly powerful for us because we have a ton of resources and not a lot of demand. We want to leverage the advantages we use in the short term with trade to get long-term advantages that are going to transition well into building a colonial empire. The second one is that we want to create a power base in West Africa, and we want to do this. This will be pretty easy. We will be unopposed in the region, and we could just cruise on through. We want to then extend that power to Central Africa, which should also be fairly easy, but we will start running into the Europeans in Central Africa. And then finally, we do want to deny access to Africa writ large to the Europeans, and at least with the phenomena we were observing in our games, also the Indians, because they start coming from India and colonize in South Africa very aggressively, and so they might even be kind of our biggest enemy as things move forward. We also have a unique kind of opportunity to kind of corner two markets. And the first is a trade that is coming from Asia and going to Europe with all the goods that are from Asia, in the sense that if we control the Cape of Africa and we also control the Middle East, we will control basically all the reasonable routes of trade. Secondarily, with the Mamluks and the Ottomans, these are the primary sources of slaves for the Europeans other than ourselves. We are the best source of slaves, and so if we get if we get their markets controlled, the markets where they have the slaves or the markets where they control these Asian goods, we will be able to corner the markets here, and we will be able to extract all the advantages ourselves. For our enemies that we are likely to face, it's going to be Castile, Portugal, Vijayanagar, apologies for the pronunciation. Now, in the short term, our economy is almost entirely RGO based right now, courtesy of the Black Plague, which killed a lot of our qualified burger pops, but we are able to recover through slavery for the RGOs specifically. Qualifications for us are difficult. We are having difficulty replacing these burgers because promotion speed is very, very slow. It has a base of 10, which is not very good for us. If we add something like a school, it will increase by another 10. Our prices of our RGOs are unfortunately collapsed. They are collapsed because, one, that is all we have. Two, our trading partners also have collapsed economies, so they don't have the same demand for that. And three, we have markets that we haven't really been able to reach yet. We can maybe trade with Morocco, given our current situation, but that's probably the extent to which we can trade in terms of trading up north into Europe and the Mediterranean and the such. As far as trade goes, we did discuss that it only reaches Morocco, and then we also lack infrastructure here. We don't have particularly good roads. We don't have any sort of access to the coast in terms of control, development, or proximity, and we want to have a colonial empire, so this presents a problem. We want to execute this Pound Lock Canal plan of making a superhighway towards the coast, and to do that, we obviously will need the Pound Lock Canal tech at some point. And with our army, we have a very small army, but we also have really weak neighbors, and Castile might not even be in Diplo range of us yet in terms of declaring war, so I think there's no one within Diplo range of us that can actually beat us in a fight, and so it's not important that we get an army in the short term, but in the long term, eventually we will have to fight, but we will have the advantage of, on defense at least, of malaria, in the sense that we can tolerate it, opposing armies can't, and so if they have to try and land us and push through us, they're going to experience some problems. And finally, we are experiencing cultural and religious problems as it relates to integrating our cores. We can expand out more if we can solve some of these cultural and religious problems. If we can't, we're probably better off staying a little bit leaner. And so, to the extent that we want to expand more, we will consolidate West Africa, then kind of stall out, or 3/4 of West Africa. To the extent that we want to expand more, it's going to be useful for us to gain advantages that allow us to increase tolerance or integration of vassals or the number of cultures we can accept. Assuming a research speed of 2.1 and a cost of tech of 30, we will assume that over the course of the first 50 years, we are going to research 42 techs, and that 7 of those have already been spent in the Age of Tradition tree, as well as unlocking part of the generic tree here in the Age of Renaissance, including getting the Caravansari tech. So what we have left to work with is 35 techs, and this should be the number that you're thinking of in terms of your budget as we look at some of these techs. Just a reminder here that we are including what I think is the most reasonable tech rather than all of the technologies, but we are going to kick things off with the professional army left side of the tree. We of course have to unlock professional armies itself. The tech itself doesn't list that it unlocks the sergeantry, but it does, or embracing the institution does. This is a building, it gives 5 manpower, which is pretty solid if you are a particularly small country, and 25% crown power in the capital, which is nice enough. For us, that 5% manpower doesn't really represent very much of anything at all, but it also gives army maintenance minus 10%. We also have gunpowder at 0.25, military tactics. I'm not exactly sure how strong a modifier this is, but this is what we're getting here. And then we have gunsmith. The thing about gunsmith is this is the production building for guns, and the next one we would have available to unlock if we wanted to skip this technology is not in the next age, but in the following age. So we would have to wait 120 years if we wanted to skip this tech and not be able to get guns until then, or we could look to import guns, and it's the same idea with the cannon maker. Exact same sort of logic going in. And then we also have the slave center. Now the slave center allows us to build in another person's country and get monthly enslavement there, so we can build slavery into their country and then import the slaves if we so choose, but we can also build slavers in our own country, so this seems maybe a little bit gratuitous, but if we're leaning into that angle of things that we want to do, we can build these in our subjects and get a lot of slaves and just import the slaves to other markets. Moving on to the professional right side of the tree, we have professional armies. Of course, we have to start off with this, and so if we invest in one of professional armies for one side of the tree, we of course get effectively a discount on the other side of the tree. We have organized recruitment speed plus 20%. This isn't what we wrote home about, but something I do want to note is, generally speaking, as you start to move down the tree, the first few techs you get are generally weak. And then we get drill army, allows us to drill our army, get some army tradition kicked up, which is something that could be useful for us, and then unlocks the armory for the 4th tech here, which I think is the key one, which is the building we can build to get a whole lot of manpower. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it gives like something like 5 manpower per level. And you can build multiple levels in cities and urban areas and start generating a lot of manpower. Beyond that, on the right side of the tree, if you wanted to get more military tech, there are things that unlock different units and this type of stuff, but I think the timing window just doesn't make sense to go deep for some of these units, because we have to use them within the next 80 or so years for it to really be useful, instead of just waiting for the next age military units. And so I don't think it quite cuts it, so I didn't even include those in here. But if you are really determined to try and fight Castile within the next 80 years, it would maybe make sense, but I just think that that doesn't necessarily make too much sense as a goal to do. But this right side of the tree is where we have the military unit unlocks. Next up, we have the left side of the banking tree. Now, for this, it is going to branch, and we're going to take a look at 2 reasonable branches. And so let's kick things off with banking. It's going to give minus 2% bank interest and also loan capacity plus 50%. I don't really know how strong these modifiers are, as we didn't really push the loans all that much, but I do think loans are an important play pattern, in that if you collapse prices and you have cheap government prices available, you definitely want to take as many loans as you need to queue up what it is you want to queue up, because the minus 66% discount just far offsets any amount of interest you will end up paying in loans, really. The second one is the Counting House. I didn't rate this that highly on the version that I played, but with the newer version, or an update that has been made, is that you now scale off of crown power the percentage of trade income you give. And what the Counting House gives you is 33% crown power in a location. So I do think that this one is going to be one that it allows us to extract more money out of trade by a pretty significant amount, considering that we can build these in all of our locations that have or are contributing a lot in terms of the estate clout, if you will. Next up, we have merchants and trade, which is an interesting one. On the short term, it's going to give us a 250 trade range, colonial range, naval range. On the short term, the trade range is maybe going to allow us access to 1 to 3 more markets. It'll maybe allow us access to Sevilla. I don't think it'll reach that far, or the other North African place that we cannot yet trade with, or if we aren't even trading with Morocco, it will definitely unlock that for us. So this is something to consider to allow us to push more trade. Next up, we have the 2 branches, which both start with rag paper, but I don't know if rag paper is worth taking in its own right, so we left it off the initial branch. We have docks, which are going to allow us to get sailors, which is something we're going to want eventually, but in the short term, sailors are going to allow us to explore overseas. We do want to get started on a colony right off of our coast, which is going to require that we explore there. That way we have a jumping off point for reaching Brazil, and also hopefully completely shut Castile out of that island. So that is something that we can consider, but in the short term, dock is maybe not going to be that good because we don't really have areas with high control. Control throttles your amount of sailors, so even if we build docks on the coast, we're really not going to get a lot of sailors. On the left side of this branch, we are going to have a social ladder, which gives encourage urbanization. This is going to give us, if I recall correctly, plus 30 in terms of base value for pop promotion. Currently, the base is 10. In some of our areas, we are going to have access to a library, which will give us another 10, but this represents an enormous uptick in the amount of pop promotion we can do. On the right side of this branch, we also have bark. This is going to give us maritime presence. And another thing that is noteworthy is the bark. I think that the upgrade for the trade ship, I'm not sure if there is one in the next age, so if we skipped this, we might have to wait 2 ages for the trade ship, or if it isn't, if it is in the next age, it is in an inconvenient location. I can't remember which exactly. Also notable on this chain is going to be the early Carrack. Now, I do think that there is a convenient location for the upgrade, just the regular Carrack in the next age, and so this would be something if we maybe felt the need to defend ourselves navally versus Castile in this age, but if we think that we're not going to rumble with Castile, then skipping this is going to be something that would interest us, because that way we would be able to get effectively more technologies overall, while not really losing combat power because we didn't fight them when we had early Carracks, but rather when we had Carracks. On the right side, deep into the street, we do have rag paper, and then we have distant markets, which is going to give plus 250 trade range, which is going to be quite nice for us to be able to trade with more people. And if we get plus 500 trade range, I think that will open up at least 3 markets for us. And so if we were to get both of the trade range techs, maybe that's something that we could plan on doing. Alright, so next up we have the right side of the banking tree, which is fairly straightforward in what we want. Kicking things off, we do have banking, we already covered that. We have standardized coins, minting threshold, plus 1%. In my experience, this didn't really seem like that strong a modifier, that it wasn't really making that much money, but we probably have really cheap gold right now, and my understanding is minting actually consumes gold, so this would increase our tax base by increasing the price of gold slightly. Next up we have the entry pot, which is a building that must be built in a market center. It gives you a 5 trade capacity. I think it also gives you some trade advantage. It's particularly good if you're peeling various market centers off of other countries at getting you enough advantage to control that particular market, or if you're founding a lot of markets, but it won't necessarily be good for us in the short term here. Next up we have undercover contracts, which unlocks the support rebels action, which is going to be an espionage action, considering we don't have any problem fighting anyone at this point in time who's near us. awareness. That is in Diplo range, not going to really be too big a deal. Next up is trade fleets, maritime presence plus 10%. Once we get going in terms of maritime presence, this will be really good, but that's probably not for like another 150 years. And then after that, of course, is the reason why we're here, the Pound Lock Canal, allowing us to build infrastructure and propagate control all the way over to the coast, which we need for our long-term plans. Also available, if we kind of go for Pound Lock Canal, we are in place to get favorable social mobility, which gives 10% pop promotion speed. This is something that we're interested in, so this is something that we could also consider here as well. Alright, next up we have the left side of the Renaissance tree, and the Renaissance tree in general is going to give us soft power for our pops, as well as help us with the cultural integration. There are some texts we're going to leave off that are somewhat reasonable, kind of a little bit more middling, if I recall correctly, overall with the tech tree for Renaissance. So if we're left over with some stuff to go for, we might go for Renaissance. And this is kind of even portrayed with our left side tree right here, where the first three are going to be really where the lion's share of the power is at, but we have a couple add-ons that are maybe somewhat reasonable. So kicking things off, we have cultural influence. Now, cultural influence this is a low value for cultural influence, but this is generally going to be something that we are interested in, and we're going to be interested in investing in culture, which I think Renaissance might unlock. Something unlocks being able to invest in culture in terms of just injecting money via a slider, but the cultural influence is going to be nice because it's going to allow us to assimilate cultures faster, which is something we need because we don't really have that much of our primary culture. I think it might also discount the amount that is required to get acceptance, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Next up, we have Renaissance Thought, which gives possible government reforms +1, which, while right now isn't really that good because I don't think we have access to particularly or additional marginal good government reforms. I think we got 2 that are good, but the third one, the marginal one that we would get on top of that, isn't very good, and we have 2 slots right now. But this is a tech that in the abstract is relatively strong because a lot of government reforms overall are stronger than a technology, or your average technology. Next up, we have Permanent Cabinet, which give cabinet seats +1. Right now, we're using our cabinet to put down the rebels to deal with the disaster that we have, but we will transition into converting and integrating provinces. Right now, less than half the provinces we own are cores, and so Permanent Cabinet will allow us to accelerate the process by which we integrate stuff, which is going to allow us to have more control over the area, but also, once we have majority pop there, we are also going to not have the same kind of problems we are currently having with rebels and the like, and so overall things will be more stable. Starting off on the add-ons that we can kind of get on top of this, we have Chancery Records. Now the Chancery, it gives some bonuses other than burghers and nobility, 2.5% literacy, but overall the literacy is where you're at. We already have 1 max level, so this would just be adding another one on top of it. You build it in the capital, it applies to the entire nation. Fairly solid. We also have the Cathedral. The main point of the Cathedral is going to be unlocking the Rural Cathedral. It also unlocks the Grand Cathedral, but the Grand Cathedral isn't really that much better than the temple that we have, and it costs more. And so the Grand Cathedral, which has to be built in towns and cities, as does the temple, isn't really that big an upgrade. It decreases revolt chance by 2.5% or more, and then it also gives additional literacy for clerics. But I think the clerics kind of cap out on literacy fairly often, so I'm not sure how strong this modifier is, and even still, we don't have that many clerics, and so I'm not sure it's really that useful. But literacy on clergy, if it is not capped, does help with assimilation, so this is maybe something we're interested in. But the Rural Cathedral, especially in our gold provinces, will allow us to have +5% control. We don't want to upgrade our gold provinces to towns and cities, generally speaking, although we do have a few towns that are gold provinces, and so this will allow us to establish more control over those areas without having to upgrade in order to build a temple. On the right side branch of the add-on, we have Sovereignty plus 10% crown power. This is solid enough, but it's not like something that screams to be gone for, but it will help us to extract more of our trade value because that scales with crown power. And crown power also has some other good modifiers going for it as well. Notably, I think it has trade efficiency, production efficiency, and so it's quite a strong modifier, but the investment of it tends to be high in my estimation, which is not giving a bunch of privileges, and the privileges I think are just kind of stronger. And then we also have rights of the nobles. Now this unlocks a law, and I don't remember what the options are for the law, but I think roughly speaking it allows you to get a lot of estate satisfaction on the nobles with relatively low investment. So I think that this is a solid enough tech such that it will kind of make our list here. Alright, so now we have the Renaissance right side of the tree, which of course we have to begin with Renaissance. After that is art schools. The big thing art schools give is a plus 20% skill of new artists. I don't really know how good this is, but artists create work of art. Those give you culture. The culture then in turn will help us to integrate people faster. So it's going to be useful, at least on that axis. I just don't know how useful. Anatomy gives character life expectancy plus 3 years. This only applies to characters. It doesn't apply to population at all. It doesn't keep them from dying or anything like this, doesn't increase pop growth. Plague resistance plus 5%, that does kind of help. So if plague hits, it's going to be useful. By the time we research this though, the black plague will be gone, so that's not a reason to prioritize it. Off to the left branch, we have a vibrant court, which gives culture's capacity plus 1. And so this is quite strong. It would allow us to probably add half a culture to 3/4 of culture in terms of acceptance, unless we do various diplomatic stuff to reduce the cost, in which case it can make us accept a full other culture, depending on the size of the culture. Next up we have university and education of the elites, or university, which unlocks the university building, which is going to be quite strong. It gives plus 20% literacy to burghers and nobility as its primary thing, but it also gives a little bit of migration attraction, a couple other things, but it's primarily for the literacy for those two classes, and literacy on burghers especially going to be useful because eventually they will be a very high density of our overall population, and when that happens, it'll be effectively plus 20% literacy writ large, which is going to be very nice for us. But also we have education of the elites, which is going to be, if we choose the best option, in my opinion, it's going to give plus 5% literacy, which will increase the research speed, this type of thing, and then it'll give minus 5% estates approval. In particular, I think that it gives just straight across extra research speed, just an extra 5%, but it might be half the value. So if you have 100 literacy, it might be that you get 50% additional research speed. I'm not really sure exactly how the modifier works. For balance, like eyeballing balance, it's probably half of literacy, but it's often also generally difficult to increase the commoner's literacy, which is the one that would most affect your overall average literacy. So I guess I'm not entirely sure. Next up, we have on the right branch, Renaissance Court. It gives expected cost to court minus 1%. I don't think this is that strong, but it is effectively refunding a little bit of income. Next up, we have is Supranational Ambitions, which gives us more power projection, plus 5. I don't really have a strong feel for how good this is as a modifier, but I know that it does make it easier for us to colonize, and it does make it easier for us to build buildings in other people's territory, buildings that would give us perhaps additional trade power within a region or trade advantage, such that we can control the trade without needing to own locations there. Next up is National Assemblies. It unlocks the National Assemblies law. I actually don't have a screenshot of what we were using as Korea for a National Assemblies law, so I guess we didn't research this as Korea in particular, we just researched something else, and so I don't have a good handle on what exactly this does, but generally speaking, unlocking laws tends to give you a really good option. And then finally, we have Thirst for Knowledge, which gives us a max literacy plus 5%. That is on everyone, so that is quite good, but it is also quite deep in the tree here. We have to go 7 deep in order to research this. Alright, next up we have the generic left side of the tree, which is kind of the funniest looking portion of the tree. First of all, Renaissance is the only age that has a generic tree, which gives people who are slow to get an institution something to work on, but a lot of the flavor you get from your culture and religion is on the generic left portion of the tree, or this is what we were noticing with our Korea run specifically, and so if I recall correctly, a lot of the Mali stuff should be here as well, and that's kind of what this reflects, but for the purposes of our thought experiment in terms of ranking edges of the tree, 3 that are, you know, timely or important. This one's just not appropriate because it's like a 3 tech lead-in to like 8 different techs, and so we can just pick and choose which of these techs are best in kind of a high priority such a sort of way, and it's not really like that we're picking a particular branch like we are with the other ones, but for this one it's just a hodgepodge of techs, but I did want to go over it and kind of talk through it. So the first up, we have Gold of Bure, which is going to be a Mali specific tech. This might be one of the first techs we get. Gold output plus 15%. This is going to be quite strong. Monthly inflation also minus 0.1%. In general, I didn't feel like we were earning a lot of money through minting, but this might feel like a lot more with the trade nerfs specifically, and the ability to mint is going to increase kind of gold consumption, so maybe there's something there. Next up, we have Reclamation of Land, which is also a Mali unique tech, and this one's really interesting. It gives population capacity plus 10%. This is useful in a couple of ways. One, it can let us build settlements if we increase the population capacity by enough to kind of push it over a threshold, which is a really strong building, but also pop growth in general is stronger when you have more population capacity. So this kind of increases our upper limit in some sense, but Mali really just suffers from like not having a lot of development at start. Like Mali looks really strong until you click the dev map mode, and then you're like, oh, okay, I understand. And so it's going to be a long time before we kind of hit our peak capacity based on our land or this type of thing, but this is one that will kind of increase the upper end of our strength level, I think, and allow us more population growth and more population overall. Next up, we have local infrastructure, which was unlocked by our administrative focus, and this gives us distance cost to capital minus 2.5%, very solid, very strong, and so let's continue. Next up, we have kind of my memory of the Muslim and West African techs. I don't know which one's which. I just remember a lot of the kind of techs we ended up going for, and this is kind of some stuff on the theme that we could be interested in and going for. +1 cultural capacity, I think, was a Muslim tech that would give us that, which is going to be useful for us for the purposes of accepting more cultures. We also had a trade tech that was specifically for overland. And we had trade tech that decreased the distance cost of moving overland. So I tried to reflect these two in some of these techs. These are just theoretical techs because I didn't have access to the tree for Mali specifically. And then also we have tolerance of heathens, which is something that we had noticed specifically in the Muslim tree. I believe they also have tolerance of heretics, but that's less useful for us because we're Muslims and we're dealing with people who are animist, which is not a heretical thing for us, but is rather a heathen thing for us. Also, we did have this branch on the right side of the generic left tree, which is particularly strong. Exotic diplomatic gifts, improve relations plus 10%. This is not really a big deal, but it's so that we can get to mills. Maximum RGO size plus 10%. Now, for a lot of countries, we're going to saturate our RGOs relatively slowly because we have to wait for employment time, and it's not like you could build up to level 7, 8, 9, 10, these kind of higher levels very quickly. But for Mali specifically, since we're running a lot of slaves, we can actually saturate our RGOs much faster. And so increasing RGO size is not a timely thing for most nations, but for Mali specifically, this is something that might be particularly strong because we can employ up RGOs in terms of having enough slaves to be able to do this, and this is going to be an advantage for us here in Mali. Alright, so finally we have the generic right portion of the tree, which I think is fairly solid, but has some techs that I'm not really sure how strong they are. Kicking things off, we have tighter joints, shout out to getting old, with Navy repair cost minus 5%. I think that this is probably not very good unless you're really mixing it up in the Mediterranean, but we're getting it to get to the next text. Next up, we have Merchant Partnership, which gives maritime trade advantage, which is going to give us several advantages once we start actually building a colonial empire, but I don't think that really starts happening for another 100 or so years, and so this won't be very high priority. Next up, we have Renaissance City Planning, maximum RGO size in towns and cities. As it stands, I think you do urbanize quite heavily over the course of a game, and we are expecting to have an increasing number of locations be towns and cities, and so this eventually is going to be extremely strong. We're not super heavy in terms of towns and cities right now, but a thing to note is it's generally easier to employ in towns and cities, slightly in terms of the laborers, and so we're less dependent on moving slaves back and forth, and so this will make things a little bit easier, and we also have 2 locations locations where there is gold, and one location where there's saffron, where it's already a town or a city. These are really strong resources, and so our geo size there is fairly strong. And as we mentioned earlier, we can saturate the RGOs better, and so our geo size generally is going to be more timely for us than it is going to be a different country. Next up, we have medieval sailing, Navy morale 0.25%. I'm not exactly sure how strong this is because I haven't paid close attention to naval combat, such that I've been able to notice a difference between these things. But we are going to eventually want advantages in this kind of sphere if we are going to fight over a colonial empire. Specifically, it's not that we need to land Castile, we just need to, fight them more on our front or where the colonies are at. Next up, we have nobility literature, which is going to give a little bit of culture, a little bit of cultural tradition, and monthly control. The monthly control is not very good. The cultural tradition is kind of okay. And so we think that this is mainly okay, but I think that this is mainly worth researching to get into burgher literature, which is going to give plus 10% max literacy of burghers, which is going to give a little bit development speed and burgher trade capacity. Now, we've put at the bottom of this section of the tree research speed, monthly research progress. I think the Muslim religion has one of these, and maybe the West African culture has one of these, or maybe the Muslim religion has two of these. I think we had a couple of options for this in our tech tree as Mali, and this is quite strong. If we assume that we have the one research speed from base and 0.75 from our liturgical language in Arabic, then it'll take a little bit under 30 years for this tech to replace itself, which seems like a pretty good rate, because then after that, every 30-ish years, it's going to effectively give you a free technology. So this seems quite strong to go for the research speed in particular, and this seems like a very good thing to get. But generally speaking, when we've seen this as something that you can research, it's almost always at the bottom of the tree, even if it is flavor for your nation, a unique advance, or this type of thing. And that is all of the trees. So I figured before I ranked my opinions on what I thought was the most important and timely branches, you might be interested in doing the same. So if you wanted to do that before we show kind of what our rankings are, feel free to pause and get that done. Alright, so these are the rankings that we came up with, or I came up with, and I just wanted to emphasize here at the start before we get into this is these are very likely to be wrong. My sample size in the game is small, my sample size with Mali is small, we have only 3 or 4 games on Mali, only a couple hundred hours, and so I think that thinking of it in terms of focusing on the conclusions of what's best is not the right way to think about it, especially because balance might change, but instead, the thing I really wanted to kind of focus in on is that a bifurcated way of thinking about tech is probably really important, and the things that are perhaps most interesting are where importance and timeliness are divergent, and you will get more EV out of your tech selection if you don't just pick the most important tech, but rather you make sure that you have enough tech slots for all the important techs, and then you pick the most timely tech in terms of practice. So going through some of our reasoning here, professional army left and right, I think that professional army right side for the armory is actually going to be, in terms of importance on most countries, probably 1 to 3. But the fact that we have access to a barracks via our culture, and that we have no scary neighbors, and that we're not even in diplo range of someone who is remotely scary, I think makes it so that we will just not get this level of barracks. In the next age, we will get a training ground, which is like a rural barracks, which isn't as good. And then in the following age, we will actually get a decent barracks. But we aren't looking to kind of mix it up. We don't need that. For the professional army left side, we're doing this because of cannons and guns. I think that we want to be able to produce them ourselves. I don't know if we could get away with trading them. That's what we did in our Mali run, is we just didn't get the tech and we just traded for them, and it was kind of fine because we didn't have any difficult fights. But I think that having the production is probably relatively important, and so that's why we scored a little higher on importance. We're not going to fight immediately, but this is a tech that is probably going to avoid awkward situations if we suddenly lose our ability to trade for guns and cannons, and we need them in order to supply our armies. Next up, I think we have banking left, and also on the deep left specifically. And this is kind of our first one where we're scoring it really high on the timeliness, but really not that high on the importance. And this is because we're going really, really deep for the cabinet action of urban planning. And that one gives you flat pop promotion speed. And that, I think, is really, really what we need right now. But on top of that, the left side of the banking also has trade range. And so right now we have an economy where the RGOs are depressed in price. Trade would allow us to boost that a lot, and also just generate value through trade. We have a ton of trade capacity because of our Caravansary unique building, so trade capacity is not a problem. We are completely throttled by who we can trade with, and then secondarily, we can employ, in terms of our own internal economy, we can employ all of the RGOs. What we can't employ are the buildings which create demand for RGOs, like tooling workshops create demand for iron, and since we can't create demand because we can't employ them with enough burgers, the thing that we really, really want right now is pop promotion speed, more than anything, basically. I know we didn't score it number one on the timeliness, but that's because when we get to Renaissance, we'll talk about it, it's just a bit faster. But I do think this is important. And then on the left side of the tree, deep on the right kind of branch of that left side, we have the additional 250 trade range. So with this kind of branching of these banking left side, we are getting 500 trade range, which I think is critically important given our current situation, but it's not going to be important once we've kind of already reached that situation where we can trade with Sevilla and the whole of North Africa in particular. After that, trade range as a value will kind of fall off a little bit, although it's generally going to be something we like. Next up, we have banking on the right side, which we ranked really high in terms of importance, but really low on timeliness. And that's because that's where the Pound Lock Canal is at. That is, if we don't get this, I think we just have to have our capital on the coast. And if we do get this, then that means we can really propagate control very, very strongly. Control is such a powerful modifier that I think that you just, if you have rivers and you're not on the coast, and you're not like mostly coastal, I think the Pound Lock Canal is just kind of like necessary for every run. But as it stands right now, we don't have enough pops in all of those towns to upgrade them to cities to build a superhighway. So the Pound Lock Canal wouldn't really be useful in an immediate sort of sense, even though it's something that we wanted to work towards. Next up, we have on the left side Renaissance, and we're thinking that we're just getting the minimum 3 here. We're just getting in and out really quick, and we're just looking for the additional cabinet member more than anything else, because the additional cabinet member is going to give us the ability to convert stuff, which is kind of, or integrate stuff, and also to convert pops to our culture. These are two major throttles, but also we have a cabinet action in the urban planning. We're going to get crimped on cabinet members. We're going to kind of be wanting cabinet members for a long time here. We're never going to feel like it's like a dead modifier. And we do even want to develop, in particular, the coastal province that has a bunch of farmland at some point in time. And that's another cabinet action. So we're really, really crimped on cabinet action. So I not only think that it's really important for us to get another cabinet slot, it's also really timely. Next up, we have Renaissance on the right side with the right branch, where we have stuff that I don't think is that important in the near future, but we do probably want the max literacy and the power projection +5. The max literacy being pretty solid, and so it doesn't feel good to have this in terms of importance at rank 8, or I don't think it's necessarily very timely. I do think we want this eventually. And then coming in on the generic right tree, we actually rated this one pretty highly, mainly because of the research speed, but also because we are getting the RGO and city size is very, very solid, and the burger literacy is very solid, and I think the noble literacy is kind of okay. And so like none of the techs in there are particularly bad, but the research progress will effectively every age give us an additional 3 techs. And I think that these modifiers really add up, and they tend to be quite good. Now, taking a look at the bottom in terms of what's going on, we said that we have 35 techs to research, right? And so we also have this max cost number in terms of if we got everything. So we're going to get all of these techs by the end of the age, and we're going to have more options available. In particular, I do think there's a lot more cultural and religious techs that we would also be researching. And so we are going to be getting most of what we want, and probably getting overall throughout the entire age, maybe 70 70-something research, but in terms of what we are able to research immediately, if we just look at what we have indicated that is the most timely in terms of our research and also the cost for researching these things, we are going to be getting Renaissance on the left side, we are going to be getting banking on the left side, and on the right side here, that adds up to around 17. That is half of our kind of investment that we have available to ourselves. Then we get on the generic right for an additional 7. Now we're up to 24. And then we get onto Renaissance on the right side for both of these. Now we're up to 29. And then we probably, in this time period, are looking to get into banking on the right side, which will get us up to around 35. I think we're just short of the 35 figure, but that's probably how we spend our technology over the course of the first 50 years in this particular run, given what we are thinking about, with the important note being that we are getting the most important tech for us at the end of these 50 years, even though we regard it as the most important technology. And so I think that this dual way of thinking is important to emphasize. But the length of this has kind of gotten away from me. I was planning on doing a few economic updates for this run, but I think that we're going to cap it and just say that this is mainly a technology focus and kind of an example of thinking our way through the tech tree, given our current situation and these types of things, showing off a bunch of different techs in the tech tree that kind of correspond with our given plan. Obviously, we didn't show something off that you would do as Brandenburg, where you want a lot of military tech, something like this, but I do think that this can be useful, and it is also kind of showing how Mali, with its isolation, gets to build a really, really solid foundation, because we're going to get most of what we want by virtue of not really needing the military tech. So I do think that's a bit interesting. But if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, leave feedback. These have taken a long time. If you scroll through it, you can see how many different shirts I'm wearing over the course of this video, which, we did this video over the course of several days. Although I think it was a bit interesting to do. If you really like this episode, maybe we can do another one of these somewhat later in the run, although I'm not sure what my time looks like kind of in the near future. A lot of kind of crimped for time types of things. So if you really enjoyed this, please leave feedback, because I'm not sure if we'll do another one, but if we do another one, we'll probably focus more on economic developments and how we are developing the economy now that we have what techs we're getting and why we're getting them are kind of on the back burner, and we've already talked through it. We won't need to talk through it again, I don't think, for the duration of the rest of the age. Anyways, have a good one, you guys. Bye-bye now.